Welcome to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine that we put together here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, so that wherever you may be, over the river or through the woods or quietly waiting the man in the red suit to come down the chimney. No, I didn't mean a socialist. Stop, easy. The Christmas season, the season of giving, the season of loving and caring for one another. And we appreciate you being here with us. You can find out more about us at virginiainstitute.org. Our first guest this week is Cully Stimson, Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, manager of the National Security Law Program in Heritage's Institute for Constitutional Government. Gee, I can't imagine it being a busy season there. Cully, welcome back to the program. How are you doing, sir?
I'm great, and it's always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
I want to start off, and we were talking about this in abstract during the election season as we wondered with some puzzlement as to what George Soros would be thinking. Why would he be so interested in all these small Commonwealth's attorneys races in Virginia, even to the point of having a Democrat ousted in a primary in Northern Virginia? And we start to see the fruits of it, especially as it relates to some of these election issues where locally the first line is often these Commonwealth's attorneys here in Virginia who just shrug and say, yeah, not really so interested in that. But even beyond the abstract of election law, this is starting to have criminal impacts in communities like Los Angeles.
Absolutely. My colleague Zach Smith and I from the Meese Center at Heritage wrote a long paper that took about a half a year to do the research on to find out what was behind this rogue prosecutor movement. That left calls it progressive. There's actually nothing progressive about the rogue prosecutor movement. And we traced the money, and we traced the races he was interested in, and we traced and read all the scholarship, if you could call it that, out there on this movement and the law reviews. And so we put together this long paper, but we've also highlighted various key rogue DAs in big cities, and we're going to go right through them. We've done Baltimore, where Marilyn Mosby is, Philadelphia, where Larry Krasner is, Chicago, where Kim Foxx is, Rachel Rollins up in Boston, and we're doing Steve Descano in Fairfax this week. And it's shocking. It is shocking that they're what they're doing, and it's resulting in a lot of death and destruction and crime going up in those cities. And mind you, crime has been going down across the country for 20 years, except in these rogue prosecutor cities.
Well, let me point again. This just jumped off the headlines on Monday morning of this week. The L.A. District Attorney made it sound in a statement to the press that he was going to start working on alleviating the pressure in the justice system for people, his words, people who were incarcerated due to the policies of previous district attorneys, as if that's what law enforcement is. It's whoever the DA is, just go lock up the usual suspects. Is that the premise these guys are working under?
No, it's much more despicable and dangerous than that. George Gascon is the person you're talking about. He was the failed elected DA in San Francisco for several years and then quit to run against the first African-American progressive liberal Democrat prosecutor in L.A. named Jackie Lacey. She was a great law and order traditional independent prosecutor. But that's not good enough for these rogue prosecutors who are who kowtow to Soros. There's four main things these people do, the four characteristics of this breed. One is they usurp the power, the constitutional power of state legislatures by refusing to prosecute entire classes of crime. Two, they misuse their office by doing that. Three, they ignore victims' rights completely, including those embedded in the state constitution. And four, because crime goes up in their cities exponentially, they treat the cops as the bad guys and treat the criminals as the good guys. And many of these rogue DAs are former criminal defense attorneys, which is nothing wrong with that. I was one. But they adopt a pro-defendant, pro-criminal mentality. And so George Gascon is just one of many of these rogue DAs. Steve Descano is another one.
Right. Well,
Right here in Fairfax.
Well, let me ask you, working in conjunction with the Defund the Police movement, I feel that there are at the very least two currents working towards the dissolution or at very least greatly devaluing the idea of owning private property, even an automobile or a motorcycle or having a business, because your private property won't be protected either by a diminished law enforcement community or a Commonwealth's attorney that's just not going to prosecute crimes against private property.
Well, look, let me give you the list of 15 crimes you can commit in Boston that Rachel Rollins, the elected DA, has posted on her website, is proud of. Steve Descano just put out a list of crimes he's going to prosecute, failing to mention all the crimes he's not going to prosecute. Rachel Rollins' 15 crimes you can commit in Boston include trespassing, there's your property crime, shoplifting, larceny under 250, disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace, receiving stolen property, bunch of driving offenses, breaking and entering. How do you like that?
Unbelievable.
Wanton or malicious destruction of property, threats, minors in possession of alcohol, drug possession with intent to distribute, resisting arrest, or resisting arrest if it's one or the other. You're trying to be arrested for one of the other crimes you can commit as a freebie. Descano has his own list of crimes that you can commit. Our blog is about to go up this afternoon, and I hope you draw your listeners' attention to it. But these guys, it's a race to the bottom. Larry Krasner, who's the rogue DA in Philadelphia, he has let murderers out. He's let murderers on the lam continue to roam the streets. One executed this police officer. Fortunately, you have the really strong U.S. attorney there in Philadelphia who sort of picked up the slack. And the same in Boston. You have Andrew Lelling, who's the U.S. attorney, who's sort of picking up the slack for Rachel Rollins. But, I mean, these people are not prosecutors. They are occupying the office of the prosecutor, but they are pro-defendant, pro-criminal. And you just have to understand that when you decide to vote for or against them.
Well, and often, like with Descano, or the fella in Los Angeles, Garcon, ran against Democrats, longtime DAs or Commonwealth's attorneys, because they weren't progressive enough. What is the end game to this?
Well, they're very open about the end game. It's not a question mark. Their end game is to, quote, fundamentally reverse engineer the criminal justice system, quote, unquote. That's from the leading proponent in the academic circles who's pushing these rogue prosecutors and providing the so-called intellectual backing in law review articles. I mean, they want to replace every law and order prosecutor with criminal defense lawyers and let criminals go free. That's it. It's that radical. They want to end all the jails, close all the prisons, defund the police, decriminalize every drug, and let everyone out. That's their goal. They have to do it in baby steps. These are big steps right now, electing these rogue prosecutors. Mm-hmm. And what's happening, as you know, is people in the cities, black, white, brown, you name it, they want public safety. They want safe streets. They want their kids to be able to walk to school or take the bus without being harassed. They want ladies not to be raped. When George Gascon, the rogue DA in L.A., was the rogue DA in San Francisco, rapes went up threefold under his watch. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Murders have gone up gazillionfold in Chicago. Chicago's more dangerous combat zone on a year-by-year basis than it was for American troops in Afghanistan or Iraq, as we had highlighted in our blog. Philadelphia, the crime rate's through the roof, and Larry Krasner is perfectly fine with that. Gascon, the newly elected DA in Los Angeles, the first group he met with, Black Lives Matter. Second group, Public Defender's Office. And then he hired the head of recruiting for the Los Angeles County Public Defender's Office to be the head of recruiting for the LA DA's office. This is where they are. This is what they are doing. And until people in the cities wake up and smell the coffee, you're going to get what you voted for.
We're visiting with Cully Stimson from the Heritage Foundation. He's their senior legal fellow and manager of the National Security Law Program. Great piece at heritage.org on crime and justice, is the title of it, and highlighting all of what we're talking about here. These progressive prosecutors and survival crime of all the Orwellian-sounding words. Cully, though, I can't help but look at this and say that they're making the criminals the victims and the property owners the criminals, to the point where it's just say, give up your private property and you come out in the street and be a criminal, and it's a much better gig.
Correct. And please don't call them progressive, because they're not. They're rogue. They're not really prosecutors. They're rogue prosecutors. Look, the traditional independent prosecutors, and when I say independent, I mean not kowtowing to a movement like Soros, because these guys are dependent on them. By the way, I was a local, state, and federal prosecutor in several different states, so it's not like I haven't done it myself. Mm-hmm. And I've been a criminal defense attorney and a judge, so I've been on all sides of the courtroom. But traditional independent prosecutors created drug courts. We created domestic violence courts. We created family justice centers and veterans courts and peer courts and teen courts. We've created thousands of alternatives to incarceration. Our policies that work have resulted in crime rates declining for 20 years and the incarceration rates declining for 20 years. The exact opposite is happening once you elect a rogue prosecutor. So there's nothing progressive, there's nothing new about rogue prosecutors except treating defendants as the victims and the police as the bad guys. That's the only thing that's new. So they're not progressive. They are rogue.
What is the mindset of some of these well-to-do families that do fundraising for these campaigns? I know that around Virginia, some very wealthy families, whether they're trafficking in money from the Tides Foundation and George Soros or it was their own money, I mean, these are the folks with property. Are they just sure that their private security will take care of those while middle and lower income families have their property wrested from them with no recourse?
Well, you should ask them. And I can guess, and I'll tell you some of my guesses. But the fact is that the policies once enacted of these rogue prosecutors hurts the very people they claim to care the most about, black and brown and poor people in inner cities. Mm-hmm. And so these rich fat cats, and I don't, I'm not jealous of people with a lot of money. I've made my money, and good for them. Mm-hmm. We live in a capitalist society, at least for now. But they're not the ones that are impacted by these laws, because they have their gated communities and their private security. I also think there's some white guilt involved. They feel like the criminal justice system is racist, which is not, and they think it's systemically racism. They believe in it, which is not true. But I think it's part and parcel of this broader movement to be a self-loathing liberal, and just by ponying up money to Soros and his ilk, they think somehow they're righting wrongs that happened, 100 years ago. So I don't know. It'd be good to get a bunch of them on and say, do you realize that the crime rate in black and brown cities where rogue prosecutors have been elected has gone up, where everywhere else in the country it's gone down? Mm-hmm. And they would say that's not true because they don't want to look at the facts.
Well, and a middle class or an upper, a lower middle class family that has maybe one or two cars, they're beaters, they're 10 years old, 15 years old, and that gets stolen by somebody. Well, that's devastating to a family that may have to drive a half an hour to work and these kind of things. And that's what I mean is they just can't call, their insurance company and have a new car delivered to them.
Well, when you look at what's happening in downtown Seattle, downtown LA, Philadelphia and certain parts of town, Boston and certain parts of town, Southie, Dorchester, you name it. The crime rates have exploded. Small businesses are getting crushed. Street hoodlums are running rampant because they know that the Larry Krasners and the other rogue prosecutors out there are not letting their prosecutors ask for cash bail. They're not letting their prosecutors revoke people on probation. They're not letting their prosecutors add enhancements for multiple convictions to enhance their sentence. They're not letting them be prosecutors. they're letting them be soft criminal defense attorneys. Look, our criminal justice system is the best in the world. It has its flaws. It's built by people, for people. It's not perfect. But it revolves around a simple concept. You have a prosecutor who represents the people, and they zealously and ethically prosecute the laws on the books, not the laws they choose, the laws that are passed by the state legislature. And you have a criminal defense bar, including with the public defender's office, and they zealously safeguard our constitutional rights because we're presumed innocent unless until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And you want to pit great prosecutors and ethical prosecutors against great defense attorneys in front of a neutral and detached judge who's well-educated and let the chips fall where they may. That's the criminal justice system. This rogue prosecutor movement upends that movement. It no longer is an adversarial system. It's a system where you have a great criminal defense bar and a prosecutor-light, pro-defendant, pro-criminal system. And that's not the way the system was designed. And that's failing. Everywhere it's happening, it's failing.
Is there an aspect of this, we've heard the expression legislating from the bench, where the left will go to a judge and get a ruling on something they would never have the intestinal fortitude to actually legislate a law for. But I feel like these rogue prosecutors and the defund the police movement also have a lot to do with the fact that there are legislators, city councils, in some cases general assemblies, that don't want to own up to the laws that they've written or actually be on record trying to change them.
So what we unearthed in our research is that, and I want to pick up on what your gut is telling you, is that Soros and his ilk decided that in terms of a return on investment, an ROI, it's more cost effective not to scatter money over, there's 3,141 counties in the United States. Can you imagine how many state legislatures you have to sprinkle money over to get a desired result? And then still you have a two-party system.
Right.
It's much easier to dump $100,000, $200,000 onto a rogue DA candidate because they're the gatekeepers to the criminal justice system. You get a DA who chooses not to be the DA, basically a defense attorney in robes, in DA robes. Boom. You've already solved all the problems that you can't solve as efficiently or cost-effective at the state legislative level. And so we showed in our research that 95%, and this is based on another article that's researched all the elected DA offices in the country. There's 2,300 felony DA offices in the country. 95% of DA races are uncontested. And the few that are really cheap. I mean, they don't spend a lot of money on that. $100,000 goes a long way. That can buy you a DA. And so Soros figured it out as a money guy, that he can get a big return on investment if he just picks who the gatekeeper to the criminal justice system is, instead of having to convince a whole bunch of legislators in the various states.
What is his end game on this? Does he just want to see the United States crumble and then see as always happens societally, when a society crumbles, a strong man centralized government takes over to, quote, restore order? Is that his end game on this? Is he making money somehow out of this?
I don't know about the money side at all. And I really can't get inside the head of somebody who is on purpose destroying the adversarial criminal justice system in a pro-defendant, pro-crime effort. I mean, I guess I just don't have that kind of warped thinking. I've heard what you said, that he wants to destroy America. I know he shorted the dollar after 9/11. I know he did a lot of things to make money over the years. But I just don't understand this. Maybe it's a form of white guilt. Thinks that it's a way to assuage his guilt for. I mean, he wasn't even born in our country. I don't know why he would feel that way. So I don't understand. I don't know. I have no idea.
And certainly one can understand, in Hungary, behind the Iron Curtain, people rounded up by the police, never to be heard from again. I can see where that would leave a mark, but you flee that, you watch that crumble. You should be the greatest celebrant of our system.
You should. And in fact, people come to this country legally and illegally because we have a respect for and enforcement of the rule of law. So when you're buying DAs and installing them who will be loyal and kowtow to your diktats from above, and they're gleefully ignoring huge swaths of crimes that were passed by the people's representative, the state reps, it just makes no sense to me whatsoever. And look, I think that this is a short-term movement. I really do. I think it is ultimately self-destructive because the citizens in Seattle who are liberals, most of them, but not all of them, my family's from Seattle, people from the inner city who want to have that urban lifestyle, they want to be safe.
Right.
And when they see the crime rate explode and they see that breaking and entering and all these other quality of life offenses are allowed, they're eventually, I think, smart enough to realize, okay, we tried it, it failed. That person was a complete failure, and they'll put in a traditional, independent prosecutor who's interested in enforcing the law.
Certainly, I don't think either you or I, Cully, would sit there and say everything is perfect in our criminal justice system.
Nope.
I mean, there's lots of places where either one kid gets charged with 15 crimes or, civil asset forfeiture, things like that can be looked at, but need to be looked at by the legislatures that put them on the books in the first place.
And civil society and, people, well-meaning people on the bar and look, our criminal justice system is always a work in progress.
Sure.
Because human nature is a work in progress. And so, I'm for body cameras. I'm for recording, and I've written and testified about for recording felony interrogations. I'm for a number of reforms in the criminal justice system. I don't see why the FBI, for example, doesn't videotape or at least audio tape interrogations. Everywhere else has been doing that for years, and it actually improves the criminal justice system for everyone involved.
Right.
So there's a lot of things we can do to improve the criminal justice system. But electing rogue prosecutors is a step in the wrong direction, and it's resulting in death, destruction, ignoring victims' rights, state constitutional rights for victims.
Mm-hmm.
More people are getting raped, more people are getting their property broken and stolen, more people are getting murdered because of rogue prosecutors, and it's on them.
And sadly, I think the thing that bothers a lot of folks is that the one person who's done more in an executive manner for real criminal justice reform is Donald Trump.
Well, look, the first step back, which I've written about, especially the risk and needs assessment aspect of it, is a great first step.
Mm-hmm.
No pun intended. And it's going to take a while to fully implement it. But it's a step in the right direction. There's more to be done. And remember, the vast majority of crimes prosecuted at the local state level.
Yep.
They're not the feds. The feds are the small fry compared to the broad, wide criminal justice system in the states. And so essentially you have 50 different criminal justice systems, and you have a federal overlay for federal crimes. And so there's a lot of work to be done in the states. We want to make sure that the public defender's offices are adequately resourced and represented. We want to make sure that capital defendants have competent, zealous advocates through the appeals section if they get convicted. So there's still work to be done. But destroying the prosecutor and replacing them with a pro-defendant, pro-crime criminal defense attorney is not the right step.
Cully Stimson from the Heritage Foundation, senior legal fellow there, manager of their national security law program. Thank you so much for doing this, and I hope you have an amazing Christmas. And thank you so much for spending a little bit of this week with us here on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.
Well, thank you. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah to all your listeners, and hope we all remain safe and healthy and get these vaccines in our arms.
Absolutely. And for those celebrating Festivus, you as well. Thank you, sir.
For the rest of us. Yep,
That's right. We continue the airing of the grievances in a moment with Margot Cleveland, senior contributor to The Federalist, and we'll get into the Texas Supreme Court petition and the follow-through on it next on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.